my friends, I'm so excited for today. I'm going to share my reflections on living in Europe versus living in the USA. And I've also spent a great deal of time in India on workshops and retreats and doing some stuff over there. So I've learned a lot about Indian culture, and that is the culture that my parents and my ancestors come from. So I know a lot about that culture as well, and I grew up halfway in that culture. And then I also learned a lot about Europe, traveling there and living there and working there. And I spent a lot of time in Europe in my younger years, in my hippie years. Now I've settled down, and I like to keep traveling to a minimum, going to my local beach, and I do love to go to Portugal once in a while. But when I was younger, I traveled a lot. So basically, I have traveled a lot. I've been very blessed. I come from a family that has traveled a lot, and we're an immigrant family. So I have family all over the world: Canada, UK, India, Dubai, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, all over the world. The Indians are all over the world. But I have also had that experience, and I spent time traveling, working in other countries. So that's what I'm going to talk about, and what I've learned. And what I've learned from different ways of life. It's such a growth experience to truly throw yourself in a different culture, have to work, have to speak their language, have to communicate, have to meet people, and make intimate friendships with people from a different culture. And you adopt parts of their culture. I've adopted a lot of European culture. I grew up in the Indian culture, so I have a lot of that. But I adopted many ways of life from them. And one of the main things is the consumer culture. So, growing up in America, a lot of things are consumer culture because it is a land of opportunity, and there's more wealth here, and there's more money circulating here. So people tend to have more possessions. People tend to have bigger homes. So generally, even people making less income have a bigger home here than they would in Europe. So people in Europe have a more smaller living space, and a lot of times they stay with their family until they're married. They don't, that also depends on the country. In Germany, I'd say people move out. But in Southern Europe, Portugal, Spain, and France, and those countries, which are the other countries I spend time in, people stay with their families until they get married and they have their own partner, and they move out to save money. And the same goes in India. And that's to save money, to have more cash flow when you do have a family and you do need that cash. And it's a cultural and a financial thing, living with family. I'll address that more later, but they have less house, so that means you have less furniture. That means you have less storage space for things. So buying things in general is not as common, and you buy more quality of things, so you're willing to spend more for quality. So to have the exact type of bed you want, take the exact type of everything, and spend more lavishly on the things you have, the possessions you have, the furniture and clothes you have, because you don't have much storage space. So you have less of a living space, less amount of things, but you spend more for lasting quality rather than things that wear out quickly. So people are more apt to buy more expensive and higher quality things that last, but you don't have as many of those things. And in America, you have a bigger space, and even people that rent, they tend to have more bedrooms in their apartment than you would in Europe. So you have more space, so you can accumulate more things, and it's more of a driving culture. So you can have more things, and people tend to spend more on things because they have more storage space, and there's generally like people buy things like RVs, boats, and big ticket items that you need storage space for in America because you have the space for those things. And also having access to a car is more common in America. If you live in the cities in Europe, generally you're not gonna use a car much of the time. And even in the villages in the countryside, the car is just for long distance trips. And not everyone has a car out there. It's not, you use your feet and the train and different things like that in public transportation, but mostly you're using your feet. You're walking. Even if it's over a mile, you are walking. The old people are walking. I think that's why they're healthier. But owning a car, a boat, an RV, the big ticket items, it's not as common there. And you don't have space to store a lot of clothes. So what are they spending their money on? Let's get the point. They're still making money. They still work. They still do what people here do. And there's a lot of hardworking, driven people there. So what are the Europeans spending their money on if they're not buying these big ticket items and a lot of clothes and a lot of possessions? Well, they do get, like, depending on the country, you get a month to 6 weeks off at a bare minimum for vacation. So they're saving for their vacation. And there's a lot more, not in the German culture, they have an eating at home culture, but in the Spain and Portugal and Southern Europe, Spain, Europe, France, Italy, there's an eating out and cafe culture. So to meet a friend for coffee, you're more apt to go out and meet a friend for coffee, have the coffee outside. Granted, it's a lot cheaper there. You get your coffee for €1.50 there instead of $6 for a Starbucks. So that's also more affordable. And drinking outside of the home, having going to a bar is a lot more affordable in Spain and Portugal. It's like €2-3 for a drink rather than $6 for a drink or $10 for a drink, depending on what city you are here. So there's more of a going out and socializing outside culture because their homes are small. Their homes are small. So yeah, you'll have your intimate close friends over for meals, of course. You're gonna have your intimate close friends over, but mostly you're gonna meet at the local tavern, bar, and tapas place. People go out a lot and spend their money eating out, and especially Germans save for vacations. They go on vacations, and if you talk to anyone in Europe, Portugal, Spain, France, England, even the cab drivers, even the working class people have traveled to America. They've traveled to Australia. They've traveled to Spain. They've traveled outside of their country because they have a small, tiny country that you could drive across in a couple hours. So yeah, of course they've traveled, and they save a lot of their money and resources for experiences rather than things. And that's one thing I adopted from the Europeans, is saving my money after, you know, the investing and saving and whatever my plans are to grow my money. I save for experiences, not things. And I'm not good at organizing a lot of clothes and things like that, and I'm not good at doing all those type of things. So I can only have a minimal amount of clothes, you know. I can only have a minimal amount of things to organize, and I can have a minimal amount of furniture to dust off and clean. So I've adopted that from the Europeans, that I keep furniture, clothes, everything to a minimum, but I buy the pieces I want. Like, I'll buy a super expensive bed. I'll buy a super expensive whatever I want, if I want that. Not because it's expensive, but higher quality things that I really want. And I also go to IKEA and buy budget things and buy, like, it really depends on what it is. But I don't skimp out on what I want because I don't have a lot of space to cover. I have a smaller living space. Granted, it's bigger than most people in Europe. It's a couple bedrooms, but, you know, Americans tend to have more space and more things in it. And I tend to have one vehicle. Like, I just want one vehicle, and most Europeans don't even have a vehicle. But if I can walk somewhere, I will walk. And I'm not like in the urge to jump in the car for everything. Of course, if I'm hauling a lot of stuff around, it's different, you know. But even when the Europeans are hauling a lot of stuff around, you have to understand they're walking. They're carrying all their stuff with them. And that's a big part of why they live a lot longer than we do here. They're a lot stronger and healthier. And in spite of the drinking and smoking, they still live longer. And it's because they're walking. And in their large buildings, even there's no elevators. So you're walking up 8, 9 flights of stairs every day just to do things. Just to go and grab a coffee with your friend in the morning, you have to do multiple flights of stairs multiple times a day. And that's what keeps them in shape. And going to the gym is not really normal, having a gym membership, but just living an active life is normal. And I think it's so lovely, and I'll talk about that. So they manage less possessions. They're not taking care of RVs, boats, multiple cars, motorcycles. And yeah, granted, there are people and hobbies to have that, but it's just not as common. And so you don't have to manage many things, so you can leave those things behind and go on vacation. And they do travel. They go outside of their own countries, and they love to travel and spend multiple weeks. And they take longer vacations, and they take more leisure time. So I've learned to value experiences over owning a bunch of things that ultimately weigh you down anyway, because you have to take care of them. Of course, if you're a collector and you value having a lot of things, so go for it. That's just my perspective on it. So moving on to the next thing. We have an individualistic mindset, which there's a lot of that's really good, and that's really is what drives America, is an individualistic mindset. But they're more of a communal mindset in the old world. So that's Germany, Portugal, Spain, France, UK, and India. Leave the UK out of it. I shouldn't even mention that. But Germany, Portugal, Spain, France, and India. So, like, a tradition and keeping ancient thousands of year old culture alive versus innovation, which is what America is all about. And both are needed in this world. So I'm saying I prefer the American way of life, but there's many things from the communal mindset that they have in the old world that we can take. So I'm going to talk about primarily family ties and third place. And so family ties is generally Europeans and Asians, Indians do not send their parents off to a nursing home. They take care of their parents in every way when they get old, and also they live with their parents until they meet their life partner and move in with them, and that's not frowned upon. And they're storing away their money for a down payment on a house or whatever they need for the honeymoon, the wedding, whatever they need the cash flow for. They're saving for that cash flow rather than burning it to a landlord. So it's not looked down upon so much like it is in America. I'd say to a lesser extent the UK and like English speaking countries. It's not looked down upon in the European countries to stay with your parents until you get married. And the same goes for India especially. And then there's more of an expectation you have to take care of your parents when they get old. And there's a lot of issues with that because there's a lot of pathologies between parents and children and traumas, and I don't always think that's the healthiest route to go. But I do think that for young people, it makes sense to bank your money away and invest money and make investments. And bank your money away and work hard while you're young, 20s, 30s, 40s, until you get married, so you can have a satisfying and less stressful married life and have a better married life. And it's better to live under stress a little bit when you're with your family and stuff, because there's more chance of your marriage going wrong than your relationship with your parents going wrong. So it's better to have plenty of money to move out and have your own life and save the money. So I think that's something that we can learn from those cultures, the communal mindset. And then, but there's also a lot of risks involved. So you have to see your individual situation when it comes to that in your relationship with your parents and see how that works. Because for a lot of people, especially Indian people in my own culture, it doesn't work out because the parents need to run the household in a certain way, and their adult children need to run in a certain way, and it does not mesh, especially with the daughter-in-laws and son-in-laws and whoever the partners have to live with. It doesn't work out at all. So I'm not necessarily endorsing that side of it, but I'm endorsing definitely living, if you're a young person between 18 and like 25, you should not feel ashamed at all for living with your parents and stacking your cash and stacking your investments, and even owning a rental property while you do that. I think it's smart when you're young. When you get older, not so smart. Like the Italians and the Spanish and Portuguese will go on living with their parents while they're married and stuff, and I don't always think that's healthy. But you need to see how that works for you financially and otherwise. And in third place, the cafe and restaurant culture in Portugal and Spain and Italy and France. That there's a third place outside of the home, because your home is usually small and tiny and very rustic. The places I've lived in France, I've camped in France, I spent a lot of time in France, living in France, working in France, speaking French, and I lived in a campground. I've lived in a tent. I've lived in a fancy apartment. I've done it all, and this is through people I met, through adventuring and doing different things. And even the fanciest houses, the bathrooms won't be that fancy. The homes will be old. It could be hundreds of years old, maybe even from the Roman times. So just being wealthy doesn't mean you're going to have a nice toilet, a nice home, and you might live in an ancient home. So people generally, yeah, you might have dinners at friends' homes, but you're going out to eat a lot, and you're going out to meet for coffees a lot. And there's always a third place outside of your home where you can meet and where the community generally meets up to drink and eat together and enjoy life together. And there's always a third place in the community where people meet up. And there's always the tapas bar, the taberna, the brasserie in France is what it's called, the brewery, the brasserie. When you meet up, you knock back a couple of beers and sandwiches and cured meats and stews. And in Spain, they have this beautiful tapa tradition where for each drink you order, you get more food. So if I order one beer, you get like a plate of fries with tomato sauce, patatas bravas. And then you order one more beer and you'll get another dish, a sandwich. And you order another beer and you get so of course it's encouraging you to drink more, but the beers are half the size they are in America. So maybe you have like a pint and a half of beer and you have a dinner. And that's a way of life. And you go out and you'll see someone else from the neighborhood. And you'll see someone else from the neighborhood and you talk, bullshit, enjoy. And there's a communal culture where you're constantly drinking and eating and socializing with other people. And in Germany, it's called Kaffee and Kuchen. So usually for most people, you invite your friends over to your house for coffee and kuchen, and you get your baked goods in the morning. So they have a tradition of fresh bread in the morning. and you go and get your fresh bread, your fresh rolls that you have with breakfast called brochen. You get the fresh, perfect, delicious, heavenly rolls, and then you butter them and you add different toppings, sausage, cheese, preserves, whatever you want. And that's the breakfast and dinner. So they have a cold dinner. They eat the same thing for breakfast that they do for dinner, and the hot meals in the middle of the day. You have your hot meal in the middle of the day. So it's very different than English-speaking countries. But fresh bread is at the center of every meal. You have to have your fresh bread and fresh baked goods, and you buy a couple pastries, or you make, or like traditional homes, the woman's making a cake, but people buy cake or pastries for coffee and kuchen, which is in between lunch and dinner. And that's traditionally the social time in Germany, where you invite your friends over, you invite everyone over, or you're with your significant other or your children or whatever, and you share delicious baked goods and coffee and talk. And that's what the socializing is in Germany. And I would say about twice a week, people in Germany go to the bar to drink beer. And the further north you go, the smaller the beer glasses get. Like, you get like tiny little beer glasses, because having it cold is important to them. So they have like couple glasses of cold beer and meet with their friends and have some delicious German food. And further south you go, to the more Catholic parts of Germany, the larger the beer gets, up to like 1-2 liters. And they have a huge beer and a huge schnitzel, which is a veal cutlet, breaded and fried with fried potatoes and onions and sauerkraut. They have that, or sausages, grilled sausage, or grilled pork steak, grilled meats, and bullshit with their friends, and just totally let go for a couple hours, for a couple days. And I really do feel, if you look at the stats, they still drink less per capita. Maybe a little more, I don't know. But they don't drink that much more per capita than they do here, but they just enjoy life, and they drink with their friends and eat with their friends and enjoy it. And having that third place, the communal, eating with friends, eating and drinking and sharing and breaking bread with loved ones. It's a way of life in these countries. It's a way of life. So that's why they live longer in these countries, because they're moving around a lot more, driving a lot less. And enjoying life is important. That enjoying life, and they smoke a lot more and they drink a lot more, but they live a lot longer because they're a whole lot more fit and active, and they're just enjoying life with their friends, and that gives you a reason to live. It really does give you a reason to live. Religion. Sorry for the background noise. That's my HVAC. I'm sorry, this is an older house. The HVAC makes noise sometimes. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. So religion. And this is one criticism I have of Europe. I do think that religion and keeping the church and keeping all these things, traditions, are important for society, and that's died in Europe, and there's more religion here and in the United States, and religion's not really a thing in Europe, and they do have old churches that they preserved. They do have the historical sites and old churches and mosques and temples and all that they preserve, but in India they have very old temples, and spirituality is definitely a way of life, everyday way of life, even if they don't necessarily follow organized religion. Spirituality, meditation, all those things, having values is a way of life in India. And I do think that that's what's missing from the West now, and Europe and the United States both. But the United States definitely, and it also depends on what region you're in, but even in the North, the southern states have more religion. You go to the North, there's still tons more people that believe in a faith. And I don't think organized religion is the only path, but I do think that the community and family structures that are missing in a lot of America, I think that that brings people together. And I do think there's a lot of corrupt things in churches and in religion nowadays, but I do think culturally it does bring people together, and I do think it's a positive force overall. But we're finding our way with spirituality. I think we're finding our way, and I do think it's a spiritual thing. I practice the Catholic religion, but I'm very spiritual, and there's a lot of things they probably wouldn't like that I do, so I'm not dogmatic in that. But I do think it's beautiful going to Mass in an ancient church. It's not ancient, it's old. I go to an old cathedral here, and I think it's great. And people still do it in Germany, Portugal, Spain, and France, but it's just not as common. But I do think there's other things that compensate for that. The third place, the family ties, and the general tradition, the ancient culture versus the frontier culture, and the experience culture versus the consumer culture, I think that still are important things to learn from Europe. So, and I do think that there are problems with organized religion, but religion isn't as big. And so, yes, as I was saying, America is a frontier culture. So this country, for a couple hundred years, it's been around, and it has gone farther than any other country, and it's uplifted the world and uplifted innovation and uplifted technology and uplifted everyone's way of life. So there is a innovation mindset in the US where they're creating new things, and that's part of the frontier mentality, creating something out of nothing. And the United States very much has that frontier mentality, and also an individualistic mentality where you leave your family and your town and your culture and you go out and create new things, or you stay within your culture. And they had that in rural America, but for the most part you leave where you're from and you go and try and make a whole lot of money. And whereas the people in Europe live to live, not live to work. So in the United States, we live to work. Our lives are centered around work, and we're always available. Like, that's one thing, the boundaries, a healthy boundary they have in Europe is once you're off the clock, you're off the clock. So no one's gonna call you, no one's gonna harangue you like they do in the United States. And a lot of people work for free in the United States. If you are especially a salaried worker, you're gonna come in and do work when you're not supposed to be. And when you're off the clock, you're off the clock in Germany. And in Germany, they have a very focused work culture. So like they're working when they're on the clock and being very productive. But break times, they take a break. And when you're off, you're off. And when you're on vacation, you're on vacation. And you're not gonna have texts from work. You're not gonna have calls from work. They respect the boundary of work and home. And having your castle, going home, relaxing. And when you're at work, you're expected to focus on work. Now they have a much more laid-back culture in Portugal, Spain, and France, where the work ethic is not like it is in Germany. And of course, there's a lot of hardworking people out there, especially in the restaurant industry and everything else. the bar industry, but they don't have the work ethic of Germany. So work, play, socializing is mixed a lot of times, and there's a culture of siesta where after lunch everything shuts down for a few hours and everyone takes a nap. And lunches are many hours in Spain and Portugal, and everything shuts down, and people have long lunches with a few glasses of wine as well, and just chill out and take a nap. And things extend and stay open later into the evening. That's a consequence of the late lunch and siesta culture. Is things stay open longer into the evening in those countries, and people eat later dinners. And so they have a different way of life depending on whether you're in Portugal, Spain, or France, or Germany. Germany is very different. And if you work from home, I recommend getting a visa and renting an Airbnb or renting a cheap place to stay. It's very cheap compared to here. Portugal and Spain are 25% cheaper than the United States for rent and food. So you can find a cheap place to stay, and if you're a digital nomad, I highly suggest Portugal and Spain. I had family in Germany that I stayed with, but Portugal, Spain, and France, I was traveling, camping, couch surfing, and living the way they do out there. So they have an ancient culture in those countries, and they have established ways of doing things, whether it's having your meals, whether it's the way you interact with your neighbors, whether it's public life, like holiday days, fiesta days, going to the cafe, spending time with your neighbors. In Germany, there's a lot of apartment buildings, and everyone in the apartment buildings have different responsibilities of weeding, sweeping out the apartment, cleaning, mopping. Everyone has communal duties. And so it's a communal ancient culture where they've been doing things the same way for thousands of years, whether that's Europe or India. India, it's so amazing, the way of life. They have so many billions of people more than we do in the West. And they have a lot of children. So they have ancient ways of doing things in an ancient culture. And there's temples where the same prayers and the same mantras and affirmations and prayers have been said for thousands of years. So for 5,000 years, this temple, you can see a temple exactly the same way it's been running every day for 5,000 years. So you can step back in time and see the way things were thousands of years ago. And the same goes for Europe. When I was living in France, I lived in a Roman city that was built by the Romans. People lived in the same houses their great-great-great-grandparents lived in, and those houses were built by the Romans. It was that old. It was stone that was put up by the Romans. So people live in old houses there, and they don't have the same conveniences, and they don't have all the things we take for granted here in the United States. They don't have those conveniences. So even rich people will live in a medieval house in France where the toilet will not work the same way it works here. Of course they upgrade these things, but it's difficult, And in India, my family has their food and stuff delivered straight to their house. Of course, they have supermarkets and stuff, but the cheapest and best ways to make a relationship with a delivery person, and for a quarter of the price, you can have vegetables, bread, fruit delivered to your house. They have fresh food delivered every day to their house in India. Can you imagine fresh, hot bread delivered to your house? Fresh vegetables and fish you pick up with the ones you want, and they clean it right then and there on your doorstep. She whips out her cutting board, and that's the way of life. And they have a lot of poor people that are willing to do anything to make a buck. So basically you could call it slavery, but a lot of people have servants in their house And you don't have to be wealthy to have a servant. Like everyone, there's so many poor people there where they have servants, and it's a totally different way of life, an ancient way of life. And it's so different than here. Like even if you go to a diner, like what would be considered a diner, like a working person's restaurant, the waiter will be wearing a uniform and stuff. And you know, it's a totally different way of life. They learned a lot of things from the British, so there's a lot of British influence on their culture. And it's amazing how the old world has influenced each other. So like the best Indian food I've had outside of India has been in Portugal. Like, and some place even as good or better than India has been in Portugal, because the Portuguese colonized India and they brought their food back with them, and they mixed racially with the Indians, and with wherever they colonized, they mixed with those people, and it left a mark with their food and eating of pork and beef and all these different, and sausages and different. So all these cultures have. So in India, when I'm in Mumbai, India, the bread, the fresh warm bread I get every morning is Portuguese bread, because the Portuguese taught them how to bake, and the British taught them different things, and they taught the British how to make curry. And the number one food in the UK is curry. Buttered chicken tikka masala, it's called. The number one food in the UK is Indian food. So all these countries have colonized each other, and they've influenced each other in a wonderful way. And there's been immigration going back and forth. And you can argue politically there's probably too much now going back and forth in Europe, and I don't want to get into politics or whatever, but I'm saying like all these countries have influenced each other. And when you go to Portugal, you and the UK and stuff, you get unbelievable Indian food because that's a way of life there. And they've all influenced each other. If you go to Vietnam, you get French baguettes, banh mi, the French baguettes, and they've influenced each other. So all these countries have an ancient history of influencing each other, going all the way back to Roman times and the Silk Road. And it's an ancient culture, and they've had their ways of doing things, their traditions, their trade, their customs, their influences have been going on for thousands of years, where that is the ancient cultures of Europe and Asia versus the frontier culture of the United States, where it's like we've created our new own culture from new, and the Native American culture, you know, was the original culture, but it's been mostly immigrants that have been populated since then. And they've all mixed their cultures to make a frontier culture, a new culture, an innovative culture, where a lot of the growth in the world is coming from the United States. So we need both in the world. And this is what I've learned living in Europe and spending a lot of time in India. And it's good to have a third place. It's good to consider valuing experiences and taking a lot of time off for vacation and leisure time. Maybe it's better to spend your money and resources on that instead of RVs, boats. But if you value that, go ahead. So it's really just trying to learn from those cultures and what you value. And you really can't learn unless you go and throw yourself in there. So what I'm getting at is if you're someone that works from home, works remotely, works in the digital economy where you work on a computer and you don't have to show up at an office, I highly recommend Spain and Portugal. And Germany, I love Germany, and I seriously recommend traveling there, although I haven't been there in 10 years. But I have been to Spain and Portugal recently, so I can't tell you what Germany is like now, but when I went there, I have great memories, and I highly recommend Germany. But one thing you have to understand is Spain and Portugal are 25 to 30% cheaper than the US to travel to right now. And I've not been to Greece, but I'm pretty sure it goes for Greece and Turkey as well. And for Spain and Portugal, it's very easy to get the paperwork done if you're an American citizen. So I highly recommend, folks, it's cheaper than your rent here. If you're living in a major American city, you can rent a spot in Portugal or Spain for cheaper than you're paying your rent here. And the food and eating out and buying groceries is also 30 to 25% cheaper. So everything is cheaper and the food quality is way better. You can eat amazing cheeses, amazing sausages, amazing food from India, amazing ethnic foods. Like, the food is way better in Portugal. Amazing Chinese food. The food is way better in Portugal than it is. I love the food here. It just has a lot of additives and glyphosate and different things that are not allowed in Europe. And it's also more expensive. So I love American food. I love the variety we have. I love everything, but it's just a lot more expensive. Go to Portugal, rent an Airbnb for a couple months and stay there and work remotely there. You will thank me. You don't have to live there, but experience life there, meet some people, make some new friends, experience Spain, Portugal. I went to France when I was much younger, and I have not been there recently. I don't know. I can't tell you about France and Germany. I had amazing experiences there, but I was much younger, in my 20s, and I haven't been there in my 30s, so I don't know what it's like now. And there's been a lot of political turmoil and other things, and I'm sure it's great for short term. But I'm telling you, Spain and Portugal is a sure bet for a short-term stay, a couple months, a couple weeks. And you're not going to spend all that much money there. So I'm telling you, it's a sure thing. And you can learn about the European way of life. And do Spain and Portugal if you can. But Spain, it's just amazing. And I do think the food is slightly better in Portugal. But you'll have to see for yourself. Go and try it and experience what life is like in other countries for an extended period of time. Learn their language. Practice the language before you go. That's a tip. Get totally involved with the culture. Watch TV shows on Netflix from their culture. You'll love it. Get completely immersed in a different culture. Whether that's Germany. I haven't been to Germany in 10 years, but the German culture is super interesting for me. So learn German, Portuguese, Spanish. Learn it. And a lot of people in these countries, I'd say most of them speak English and they're willing to work with you. But another tip, they're a lot more apt to work with you and treat you super well and give you the best deals and give you jobs and give you like part-time, or not jobs, but you can't really work legally. You have to have some sort of thing going on digitally where you can work as a nomad. You're not going to find a job easily in those countries. They're struggling for jobs, so I wouldn't work there at this point. But I'm saying you get your job in America and you go there, digital nomad, and your food's going to be cheaper, everything's going to be cheaper. And you'll meet people. If you put yourself out there, you're going to meet people and learn about their way of life. Learn their language. And when you're meeting people, you initially speak their language. So initially talk in Portuguese, Spanish, or whatever. Initially talk to them in their language and ask them if they speak a little English. And that's a lot more respectful. So you start speaking their language because you're in their country. Show the respect of speaking their language. And learning as much of their language as you can. Try to be conversational in their language and immerse yourself in their movies, TV, culture. On YouTube, even if you don't have Netflix, on YouTube you can find plenty of language learning resources. You don't need to spend a cent. Learn the language, go there, and when you're initially speaking to them, speak their language, and then ask them if they speak English. But try to learn their language, meet people, date people. Meet people in their culture. Meet friends that you'll have for the rest of your life. I have friends from the rest of my life in other countries that I'm close to, that I speak on WhatsApp with. So these are friends, connections you can have for the rest of your life, and you can even meet someone, marry them, and immigrate there if you want to. So like, and work there. So like, go live in other countries, check it out. Take the lessons you can and apply it here, and your way of life here will be so much richer because you can have the best of America, the best of innovation, the best of the wonderful culture we have here in America, and then you can take the wisdom of the old world. That wisdom's thousands of years old. The European culture is thousands of years old. The Indian culture is thousands of years old. And I highly recommend traveling to India too. Now, India, you can find a way to travel. I've always had family to stay with, so I'm not an expert on travel in India because I went along with other people's agendas and let them tour me around. And I got lucky enough where I didn't have to pay for a tour or tour guide in India, but I highly recommend India as well, and Asia as well. I'd like to travel to Thailand, Cambodia, all those countries, but I haven't been there. But Europe is where my expertise is at, and Spain and Portugal for an English-speaking person. So if you are American, Canadian, Australian, I highly recommend going to Spain and Portugal and seeing their way of life and making local friends. You can't see their way of life if you're making only English-speaking friends. So you have to meet Spanish and Portuguese-speaking people and make friends with them and throw yourselves in their culture. It's just so amazing. And if any of you have any stories, I'd love to hear about them below in the comments about traveling to any of these countries and what you learned. And I think that it's a great enhancement to life. So seriously consider it. If you have the money, don't blow your money on a bunch of bullshit that you're not going to use. Like all these toys, like a little kid buying possessions that you're eventually going to get tired of in a few months. So you're going to get tired of that new car. You're going to get tired of all those things. You're going to get tired of having all these things. Spend those thousands of dollars on travel and see where it takes you. And these experiences never get old. So your truck, your car, that's going to get old in age and you're going to have to replace it. But those experiences in your heart that you met people, you connected with people, you experienced new lands, new cultures, new ways of life, and brought those lessons home here to live a charmed life, to live a passionate, charmed life here in the way the Spanish and Portuguese live. They live a life of passion. The Uber driver, they make a lot less money than we do here. The Uber drivers, the wonderful Portuguese people I met and Spanish people I met when I was there a few months ago, the Uber drivers don't make more than 400, 500 euros on a good month, but they're living a charmed way of life. They go out to coffee. They have coffee with their friends. They have pastries with their friends in the morning. They still go out. They still go out to eat. They still have a wonderful, plenty of time off, many weeks off to spend time with their families. Even if they maybe can't even afford a vacation, they go for vacation locally somewhere. And they have a wonderful time with their families, and they have plenty of time, and their boss is not calling them on weekends, and their boss is not always up their butt, haranguing them all the time. They have a way of life. They have plenty of family time. They have plenty of time with their friends to chat, drink coffee, chill. And in Germany, the way of life, they work probably a little more in Germany, but they they know how to live in Germany. Like, they work hard, but they also play hard. There's always if you're young, go to Berlin. If you're young, I'm telling you, go stay in Berlin on a tourist visa. If you're young and you have an income, go to the city of Berlin. The amount of raves, parties, the doner kebab, the street food, for a couple euros, you can get marinated and roasted veal in a pita bread with salad and you can live on those doner kebabs and sausages and go to raves every night and meet all sorts of beautiful women and have the time of your life in Europe. You can have the time of your life and learn how they live in all these places and bring it back home as a gift instead of spending it on Amazon, spending it on having packages delivered to your house with different things. And so it's all about what you prioritize. What are you going to spend your money on? Are you going to spend it on having unforgettable experiences that you carry with you for the rest of your life? You'll be on your deathbed remembering those parties, remembering those late nights where you had incredible food, incredible drink, incredible friends, incredible experiences, incredible pleasure, just being able to let go. Spend your money on that rather than just having a box from China, a box made by some slave in China, shipped to your house that you'll like for maybe 3-4 weeks. You'll think it's cool, and then you'll get tired of it and buy another one. So let go of the consumer culture and learn and travel and see Europe and Asia and the ancient world and take the ancient lessons that are thousands of years old that people perfected how to live life. And that's why they live so much longer. They smoke and drink like a chimney, but they live longer because they're so much less stressed than us because they're valuing the right things in life. And I think there's so much to be learned. So get your boots on and travel, folks. And let me know in the comments below about your travels or your dreams of traveling, your manifestations. And when you write it out, the chances of it happening become more. And when you research it and you make plans for it and you make your little baby steps towards your travels, it'll happen. So it starts with making a comment below, like and subscribe, help me in the algorithm, and I'll be talking to you soon. Love you all. Take care. My information on coaching, if you want to make a plan for travel or for living your best life or anything, I can work with most budgets. So we can make a plan to get you to Europe. I can tell you what you need to do with the immigration and passports and everything like that. And we can make a plan. I can see how much money you have to work with per day. And we can get you to Europe for a small fee. I can help you plan. If it's all over your head, I've gone to Europe on a budget. I have lived in a tent for months in the south of France and had a box of wine and a baguette and cheese with the women. I was traveling with this Irish girl, another American guy, a French girl, and we had the time of our lives in a campground in the south of France, eating cheese, drinking wine, partying, having the time of our lives, not even showering every day. We still had the time of our lives. I can tell you how to get on a work-study program like that. And I was volunteering, helping to restore an old castle in the south of France. And I was studying history at the time in college. So I was a history major on a budget and I didn't have money. And we went to the supermarket and bought baguettes, cheese, and sausages and survived off of that. And Europe, the food cost is lower. So you can survive off the supermarket and they have good fresh bread and they have sausages and cheese to die for. And I can tell you how to live on a budget in Europe. In Germany, the beer is cheaper than bottled water. So you can have an amazing time in Germany. The bread is subsidized by the government in all these countries. So you can buy a huge loaf of bread for 60 cents in Germany, France, Portugal, Spain. You can buy a huge loaf of bread that will feed you for the day for 60 cents. And you can buy a piece of sausage for €1 and a piece of cheese for €1. So you can live on €2.50 a day. And I can tell you exactly how to do these things. How to live on €2.50 a day when you have your accommodation covered. And there's different work study programs, different things if you're a student, different things. If you're someone with an income and you have money and you're bringing in money to spend into the country, and you have you can want to be a digital nomad, I can tell you how to do that. I've done that. So I can tell you how to do that, how to run your business from there, and I can tell you how to, if you're poor and you're on a budget, but you want to travel before you have kids and a family and you want to have the time of your life, we'll see what your priorities are. I can see whether you want to party it up or whether you have a certain academic intention. You want to do a work study where you are learning something that'll help you get into a better grad program, a better college program, and you want to work and volunteer your time. And so working 8 hours a day volunteering, but you'll have some of your costs covered, like food and stuff. I can show you how to get into those programs. And those are a dime a dozen. I can help you get into those. Or if you have some money saved and you want to stretch that and you just want to go and really let go, party it up. If you're a writer, if you want to write or work on your content creation or whatever in a different country, and if you want to party it up on a budget, I can tell you how to do that. So I can help you with some consulting on that and a lot of other different things. But I have spent many, many years living in Europe and working on immigration, working on the paperwork you need, working legally there through work study programs and stuff like that. So to find the right path for you, I'm there for you. My information is below for the consulting and coaching. So like, subscribe, and hit me up for consulting and coaching. Love you. God bless you, and I'll talk to you soon.